I 100% get it. I have a very similar story to you. And my father was in the real estate business, and it was the business also of his father with his uncle, and it's not for me, right? And so it would, yeah, that was a thing. And my father just very recently retired and also sold the business just a few months ago, and he's 86. And so, yes, and so he, it was really great that he kept working all those years. He did it as he wished, the hours he wished, with the clients he wished. So it wasn't, a full-time job where he had obligations, but it really just kept him alive. It kept him going. It kept him doing things that he loved to do. And so that was a little bit difficult. And then I'll tell you another part of my story. The rest of my family, they're all doctors. So the expectation when I was young was that I would also become a doctor. So I love medicine. I think it's a very, very interesting field. But again, it's not for me. And I knew that I don't have the character, and I didn't want to be working in hospitals with sick people, and it's just not for me. So growing up, the option was, if you're not going to be a doctor, what are you going to do? And so it was either, in my environment, it was, you're not going to go into dad's business, which they didn't know at the time, and I also didn't completely know at that time. But if you're not going to be a doctor, you're not going to do that. What are your other options? So the other options were, you either go into business or you become a rebel and you become a lawyer. And so I picked the lawyer as a rebel. I picked that and said, all right, well, that was my interest. Until I spent a summer abroad when I was in high school. And really had always wanted to travel. That was one of the things I absolutely loved. I always wanted to go to other places and know other cultures and learn other languages. And I came back thinking, okay, what I like about law, I don't know if I can do in an international environment, right? Because I was interested in trial law. I thought it was really cool to stand up in front of a judge and make your case. And so in university, I said, well, what can I do? And I studied economics. And I picked economics because it was businessy enough, but also gave me an opportunity to see it and do a lot of things, because I studied economics of China. I studied economics of Russia at that time. I studied statistics, and there was a lot of freedom as far as what you were able to pick. And so I could pretty much follow a lot of my interests with that, major in university. And then decided, all right, I don't think law is for me. I'm going to go into business. Now, what do I do? And then it was, well, you can go into banking, because I'd always kind of like finance as well. And during the interview process, also said, this is not for me. I'm like, okay, what am I left with? Right? There are not that many options. There's millions of options in the world, but in my world at that time, there weren't that many other options. And so I said, all right, well, I'm going to go into consulting. It had a lot of the things that I liked about it. You worked on projects, you got to see a lot of different things, you could travel and go to other places. So I started working as a consultant, completely unexpected, just kind of fell into it. And there I was, and I did that for a number of years.
Wow.
I can continue if you want to tell more.
Please. Instead of studying, get off our conversation in formal way, I think informal way like this is also very interesting, and I think it's a lot of the people who are listening to our conversation today also experience somewhat of their family history, having expectations and stuff, and some fall into the expectation and start doing the career following somebody else's wishes, and then some be like you, be like me, and then be able to pursue a career, successful or not, we don't know, but at least there's a different path that we can decide, right? So what happened after that?
Absolutely. And so I was working in a consulting company. I was working in New York as a strategy consultant. And I had the opportunity to work on a project for Banco Santander, which is a Spanish bank. At the time, I didn't know any Spanish. I had English. I was born in the U.S., even though I live in Spain now. I was born in the U.S. I had Latin in high school, so I really didn't know any other languages, and just was so fascinated by the work. I was working with people from Spain, with people from Latin America, and at some point, when that project kind of went down, I said, all right, I'm independent, right? I finished my university, I'm working. it's time for me to kind of go and do that thing that I was always wanted to do. And I decided I was going to move abroad. And so literally packed my bags and bought an airplane ticket and decided to come to Spain, to Sevilla, which is where I actually now live. A friend of mine from university, his mother was from Barcelona. And I had a very good relationship with him and the family. And she said to me, Michelle, I think you'll love Sevilla. And I said, okay, right? I don't have a specific destination. Why not? I've got my literally suitcase with me. I can go anywhere. Let's try Sevilla. It sounds like it's a nice city. So I ended up here. And loved it from the first moment. Just felt very at home, very comfortable. Something about me, I don't know if in past life I could have been Sevillana from here. Something just felt really comfortable and at home for me. So then I stayed here and had to decide what to do. So I said, well, what I really think I love is international business. So I'm going to study that. And I did a master's in international business here. And then started working as a consultant for companies. At first, it was local, small, medium-sized businesses who were working on international expansion at that time. And so I spent a number of years working with Spanish, European companies, and it kind of expanded, who were working to take that next step in their business. They had been very successful in their home market, and they were looking to expand. And so I traveled the world. I think I've worked in countries and projects in over 50 different countries. I think it was 52, Vietnam being one of them, last time I counted, with, companies from so many different industries, from very common fashion to tech to consumer goods to food and beverage. It's very common here. So I once worked with an organization who makes industrial screws for tunneling machines. So there's the machines that make tunnels so a train can pass through. So it's a huge variety of things in many, many different countries, and with relatively small startups to multinationals. So really, really huge experience. And absolutely loved it, right? Really engaged in the work. At one point as well, with all of this work, there was this kind of, I call it the light bulb moment. There was this thing, and kept saying to myself, well, what is the biggest impediment? What are the things that are really we're getting stuck on the projects? And it was always the same thing. It wasn't the strategy. It wasn't the technical piece. There was one. It was the idea that, growth and expansion is very positive. We had the support of the company. We had the support of the leaders. We had support of the teams for the most part. That's what we worked on. But then actually adopting not only the mindset, but the specific behaviors in communication that allow you to be successful in this next stage, that's not that easy to do. Even if you want to do it, it's really, really hard to do. To kind of leave behind maybe some of the things that have allowed you to be successful and adopt some new things, it's a big leap. And even if you really want to do it, it's often very hard to do it, and particularly to do it in a consistent manner, right? In a day-to-day manner. It takes time. It takes a lot of conscious effort. And that was the thing. That was that one thing that was the biggest hiccup in all of the work that we were doing in any place in the world, in any industry, and in any size company. And I said, well, it actually makes sense, because human beings are human beings. We're people, right?
Yes.
So that common thread ended up making a lot of sense, even though it was such diverse environments. And that led me to coaching, actually. I didn't even know what coaching was at the time. I really didn't know.
What year was that?
And so, what?
What year was that? When was
that
it?
was actually 10 years ago.
So
it was in 2012. Yeah, 2012.
Wow.
Yeah, I didn't know what it was. And I started researching on the internet, just kind of thought, well, what is this? Is it like psychology? Is it human behavior? What is this? And so I started researching it, and I found coaching. And I said, oh, that sounds maybe that could work, right? Let me see. And investigated, and then started just having coaching conversations. But conversation is so easy. You can have a conversation with anybody. You don't need to you don't need to sell it to anybody. You don't need to have a budget to be able to do it. You don't need to formally include it. It's just a conversation. So, well, this is easy. I think I can do this. Let's have some conversations and see where it goes. And so I started to have conversations with people and realized that there was something to this, right? It was helping. It was allowing that process to move more smoothly. It was, really supporting and sometimes challenging people to take those steps that they needed to take. And so I said, all right, well, there's something here. Let me do some formal coach training. Let me learn more. And then I ended up, because it had been working, I ended up without a lot of difficulty being able to include coaching as a formal piece of those consulting projects that I was working on. And so for a very long time, it was if we're doing consulting, we're also doing coaching. So it was individual executive coaching, it was team coaching, because there was a lot of work that needed to be done cross-functionally, or one team was working, if you're working with a production team and a design team, they need to be able to work well with their suppliers and their manufacturers. And so all of that also got involved. So it was a really interesting and lovely mix, which I did for many, 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 many years. Well, many years. I did it for 10 years. I feel like that's a very long time in the life of somebody, but it's a long time. So for 10 years, and that's what brought me to where I am today, actually. So really interesting career path.
Wow.
For me, I think it's interesting.
10 years ago, the term coaching is still in a very early age of that. But now, if we talk 10 years later, I think that a lot of that been brought into the ballroom for leaders to talk and then try to implement for their organization. So I think you pick a very very wise decision back then. Let's explore it together. All right, Michelle, allow me to bring you all the way back to your childhood. Okay, because I'm intrigued to understand. Michelle at the years of 7, 8, or 10 years old. What did you dream of one day when you grow up you would be doing?
Well, if I'm honest with you, what I dreamed of was being a professional tennis player.
A tennis player. And then any reason for that? You live in the US
Well,
back then, right?
yeah, I lived in the U.S. I was born in the U.S. And moved to Spain and live in Europe since almost 20 years. So after I finished university and had worked for a few years. And so when I was young, I was very sporty. I was a tomboy. I played all kinds of sports. And I really, really got into tennis. So I competed, juniors level and kind of semi-professional, and that for me wasn't my parents' dream for me, but that was my dream. I wanted to be a professional athlete at that time of my life.
And
And I still do. If I could, I would. So later today I'm going to play tennis. It's one of my passions, and that sports for me is a passion of mine. So that is really what I dreamt about. Yeah. But if I look back as well, it's very interesting because I was always the person who was trying to figure out the why behind things. Why do people behave the way they do? That was something that I didn't recognize at the time that would lead me to my career, my current career. But it was there. I was always so curious. I still am very curious about everything and anything. I'm always interested to know why people behave how they behave, why they communicate the way they communicate, why they make the decisions that they make. And that was a very, very common theme for me throughout, my childhood and also now. But I didn't realize that I could make a career out of it at the time. And I don't know if the people around me recognized that as well, or it was just we were in a different environment and, the thing to do at that time was something very different. But if I look back, it makes so much sense to me now that I've ended up where I've ended up. But at the time, it was just, the girl who always asks a million questions and is always curious about everything. And, I could literally go 5 miles down the road from me to a place that has no tourist interest or no interest at all, but I had never been there. And I was so curious and I wanted to go, and I'm still like that, right? And the same thing about, why do people say what they say, behave how they behave, think how they think, act how they act, decide what they decide. All of that is just fascinating to me. So I think human nature and human behavior was something that's always there. I just didn't realize that I could make a career out of it. And I fell into it I fell into it, right? Without even making it a conscious decision. And now I'm quite aware of it.
Wow. So it would be interesting to know, if you when you grow up as an individual and then have a lot of question in the mind of how people behave and things like that. So how's a regular day looks like to you back then and now?
Back then in
Ah,
school,
yeah, back then, how people reacted to that? If they meet you and you have a million questions to ask, a million things you wanna, be curious to explore and things like that. Where maybe the people around you don't have that kind of thing. They want to have a normal everything, just regular as usual. So how would they, react to, a Michelle back then?
yeah. So I think as a child, it's much easier than as an adult. Because people expect children to be curious. And at least in the environment when I lived, it was something that was looked well upon. Sometimes people got a little bit frustrated, obviously, if you ask a million questions, but, little kids are curious. And that was something that was supported in the US at that time. And it was something that was looked fondly upon. And I had the opportunity to explore. I was the kid who did every extracurricular activity in the book. Apart from sports, we did every sport in the book. Played several musical instruments and joined all the clubs. I was that kid was just always doing things, and there was tons of activities available to me. So I was always busy, and I was always involved in a million different things at a time, and I still do. That's just my personality, right? I still do. So I was really able to explore all of that curiosity. And that's kind of the way that I was able to I guess feel that I was developing in that aspect and be happy and content, right, at that time, because everything was new and that was fabulous.
And then how
I
is
was able to learn.
that I would want to bring you further on to, after you graduate and then you chose a career in business consulting, and that is a very hard career to get into, very competitive in a sense, but also it's a lot of hours of working, a lot of things you need to research, to learn and to explore and things like that. And why did you choose a career that's very very hard for just a fresh graduate person to come in and join in?
I thought it was fabulous. I
I
mean,
did
I
thought it
was young.
fabulous.
I was I was right out of university. I was, working and working. I would be able to work and at that time I worked at a couple different industries. I was able to learn a lot of things. I was able to travel. And what more could I want? Right? And yes, you worked on a team, you worked with a lot of different people, you interacted with a ton of different people. So it was a really great way to learn. It was a great way to grow. It was, also relatively I was able to work relatively independently. And it doesn't mean that, your first career, your first job out of school, you're independent, which you're not. But there was a lot of responsibility given to me. And there was a lot of expectation that I was able to take that on and do something with it and check in at the point where I needed to check in and get support from the people that I needed to get support, and then also support different people at the same time. And that was a really, really great learning experience. I, in my personality, I knew that I needed to be in an environment that was had a little bit more freedom. I didn't see myself, in a 9 to 5. I didn't see myself at a desk job all day. Didn't see myself doing something very specific and becoming an expert in that. I'm a generalist, and I always have been. I know a little bit about a lot of things. And I think that's also very, very useful for coaching. And one of the things that I always say to my clients and that I think distinguishes me as a coach is that really broad experience. It's very, very hard for me to work with someone where I don't understand a little bit about the environment that they're in, about the context around where they're working, who they're working with, and what they're doing in their day-to-day. And the context, I think, is so, so, so important. And that's one of the things that I think it really makes me this generalist, not an expert in anything, but someone who knows a lot about a lot of things. And I think that is very, very helpful in my work today as a coach.
Wow, because in my note in here, one of my one of my audience asked me this question, and then he's also in the business consulting firm, and he said that
Mm-hmm.
he wants to know the secret of how Michelle can learn so many different industries, so that when you become a coach, you start coaching for your clients. Then at least you need to, and then in very broad industry, right? And it's very different industry also. So you have to come in and you speak the language in order for the clients to to open and share the expertise, their story with you. And then how did you learn though? For me, it's
Well,
hard to me to learn. So how did you learn? Very
yeah.
different though.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the fabulous things about what I was doing as an international business consultant,
Mm,
because my expertise was how to help a company that's looking to expand internationally. Now
mm,
that could be export, that could be opening an office and establishing themselves in a different country, that
mm,
could be developing a completely new product line to be sold in a different part of the world or to
mm,
adapt it. It could be marketing, it could be a million different things.
mm,
That was my expertise. So I was hired to go into an organization, understand their business,
mm,
understand how they're working,
mm,
and then figure out how to take that and make sense of that and take them to where they wanted to be in different places of the world. And it could have been at one place they'd already identified that, but it could be that the world was open and
mm,
I had to help them figure out where to go.
mm,
So because of those years that I spent in international business consulting, I was very, very fortunate to be able to actually go into a lot of different companies,
mm,
different industries, understand what they do, how they do it, how their organization is set up, what their business looks like, what's important to them,
mm,
what's going to help them be successful. And now I have all of that knowledge.
mm,
And so am I an expert in pharma industry? Am I an expert in manufacturing? Am I an expert in, you know, consumer goods? Not necessarily, but can I talk to somebody from consumer goods or pharma or tech or IoT or technology, lots of different things? What's the company who manufacturers who takes some fish product from the sea,
uh,
converts that into something, and then sells that in different places of the world.
uh,
So am I an expert in marine biology? No. In that business? No. But I know what their day-to-day looks like. I know what
mm,
their challenges look like. I know
mm,
what opportunities look like. I know probably the things that they're thinking about and they're affected by, and the things that
mm,
can help them become better leaders, the things that can help their business thrive, the
mm,
things that can help them relate better and to work better with others,
mm,
because I've seen what their day-to-day looks like and I've been there alongside them.
mm,
And so that is the thing that allows me to have enough context. Now I'm a coach, I'm not necessarily a mentor for them. I'm not an advisor for them. I haven't been in their position.
mm,
And so as a coach, I don't need to have that knowledge. As a
mm,
coach, I need to understand enough about their environment so what
mm,
they're telling me makes sense, and then
mm.
go into coach mode.
Yeah, that's a beautiful transition, isn't it?
Absolutely, 100%. And it makes them feel comfortable, right? And in the end, the coaching needs to feel comfortable with
Mm,
who they're talking to, and that is on a personal level, but it's also on a professional level.
yep,
They need to know that I'm going to get what they say, that it makes sense to me, that I understand, and then I can ask them the right questions,
exactly. Yeah.
and that's important.
That's very important to me because right now, we the coaching becoming too familiar, and there's so many, there are so many coaches out there. And to me, when the market, has a lot of coaches, it's also dangerous because if we not having the qualifications that can help somebody to grow, then maybe the way that we coach can, do more harms than more benefits. So that's why the explorations of knowing the pupil and see where we can add real value is very important. Otherwise, I'm afraid of the negative side of it. Michelle, when you work for an business consulting firm, right?
Hmm.
And you took a leap of faith and having your own company, and that is very brave of what you did. And a lot of my friends who are very successful for corporate world, but then taking that leap of faith always a very big challenge for them, even when they got retired. And I asked them, what would be the thing that you would change in your career? They say having my own company. Okay, so what made you back then, Michelle, to to say, hey, enough is enough. Let me do my own company.
Yeah. So I have a very high tolerance to risk. I'll
Mm.
just say that.
Ah.
Um, and so I go for things. I really don't hold back. Kind of always have the feeling, obviously in a somewhat measured way, always the feeling of why not try. I don't want to have ever that feeling of regret that I didn't do something, that I didn't try something.
Mm.
And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. I can switch, right? I can go back. I can be a consultant again. I have other opportunities available to me.
Mm.
And so I always have that feeling of I'd rather try. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out.
Mm.
And do something else than sit there with the itch, right? And then you have somebody who contacts you and says, hey, could you come help me with this? And you're like,
Mm.
okay, this is the opportunity. I didn't put a full structure in of a business and hire people and say, okay, I'm here, come. No, the opportunity arose and I said, okay, great, this is the moment. I'm going to take this opportunity and I'm going to transition. All right, I didn't leave everything behind and start. I'm going to transition into having my own business. I have one client. Let's start. Let's see. And I've been very, very fortunate because almost all of my business is word of mouth. It's coming from word of mouth. There are people that you work with who then say, oh, how did that happen? And they talk to other people and they say, oh, I work with Michele, but for coaching and consulting. So it's been relatively easy, but again, you have to have that high tolerance of risk, I think, in order to do it. And just make that leap of faith. And I happen to have that.
I think it's also there's a big level of confidence inside of you, and then risk is one side, but the confidence inside of you telling you every day that hey, you can do it, and if you've been successful working for someone, some organization, why not doing it? And so, thank you for answering that question, Michelle.
Yeah. Isn't there saying like the only two things that are irreversible are death and paying taxes? So, it's not, it doesn't have to be that big or that scary if your mindset is let me try, let me see, let's see how it works, right? It doesn't have to be a final decision. It can be something that evolves, it can be something that grows, and if not, well then I'll just shift and look towards somewhere else, and that's another opportunity, right? Kind of thinking of them as opportunities instead of hard decisions that need to be made. So I always just look for opportunities.
Michelle, you mentioned the word mindset, and and to me it's very fascinating, and because I always believe, when I was young, I always believed that people at a very big level in organizations, those who are at the leadership roles, having amazing mindset that make them get into those levels, get into those titles. But the more that I work as an HR consultant, the more that I work with client coaching, I just realized that indeed they're not. They have good mindset, majority of them, yes, but then a part of them also need to have adjustment, need to have a lot of changings and things like that. But then we look back at organizations, we look back at schools, and then there's a lot of curriculum back there, put there, a lot of training put out there to help people to grow in their mindsets. But until now, there's still that space still has a lot need to do and explore and improvement. What happened? Can you explain what
What happened?
happened? Yeah, what happened to to leaders that they need to develop the mindset? I saw a lot of activities from you share also helping people
Uh-huh.
to grow their mindsets. What's wrong with us?
Well, first of all, we're humans, right?
Yes.
That's psychology. That's who we are. We're human beings.
Mm.
And I also think a lot of it is an adaptation to your environment, an
Mm.
adaptation to what's going on.
Mm.
Um, people like control. They don't necessarily like uncertainty. We like certainty. We like knowing how to do things. And it's very challenging to always kind of be attentive to what's going on around you. And I think that is so crucial. In those moments, you know how to be an excellent leader today, right? Tomorrow, your world might look a little bit different. And it doesn't have to be something big as a pandemic. It doesn't have to be something as, your CFO leaving. It can be small things that happen in a day-to-day in your business. And those small things end up building and building, and then more changes and more changes and more changes. And so if you're not attentive to those small things and able to iterate, and able to try things out and be able to react to them proactively in certain cases and reactively in other cases, and be this adaptive being who understands that every moment in our lives, every moment of our day, every moment of our career is different, then I think those fabulous leaders who are great today get stuck in the, okay, this is working. And then when they realize that what was working yesterday isn't working 2 weeks from now, then we've got to help, right? Then we've got to work on this. That has been my experience. I think that most people who get to a leadership role are really capable. I think they've done things that have made them very successful. But again, just like what led me to coaching, what made you successful in the past isn't necessarily going to make you successful in the future. And helping someone to move through those transitions and move through that change is what really supports leaders to continue to be fabulous leaders across their career, across time within the organization. So we're continuously, the only fixed thing is that we're constantly changing, right? And this is true.
Yep. And I'm curious to connecting the dots also, Michelle, because with the great resignation that happened in the past 2 years, it looks like that people, the employees, the workforce start to raise their voice and the inner demand, expectations, and organization actually are responding very well to that now. I see there's a lot of changing, a lot of measurement that put in to make sure that the voice are heard and the people are really taken care of, right? But then look back at the measurements. Okay, those measurements also existing for 20, 30 years, like people retention, engagement. We have a lot of index, we have a lot of like reports year after year after year, but it looks like it's been ignored for a long time, right? And now things are back to the very, very basics that leaders need to really look at that. How can we help leaders avoid having the same ignorance of of forgetting those measurements again in the future, though?
Yeah, so that's something that I think is quite challenging. But again, there's been kind of what I'm going to consider a social change over the past few years, for many, many different reasons. And one of the things you mentioned back a little while ago when I told you a little bit about my story, and I said I have a very high tolerance of risk, you mentioned confidence. A lot of times people want to do things, right? They want to start things, they want to do things, but they don't have completely the confidence to be able to do that. And we're also creatures of habit. And so why did I, do certain things when I was younger? Well, because that's what was there. That was what was expected of me, right? And so a lot of times people want to have different ways of working, want to have a different relationship with their company. I mean, how many people say that they want to have better work-life balance when you have kids? How hard is it to figure out how to take your kids to school, how to do this, how to do that, how to work at the same time? I don't know anyone who has kids really that works that doesn't have those issues to resolve. But that's the way life is. That's the way the world works, right? Kids go to school at the same time that you have to enter your office. It makes no sense. What sense does it make? It doesn't. But I think just over the past few years, a lot of things like that, the context has changed enough so that people are able to start questioning whether that's really the way it needs to be. So do I need to stay in the environment I'm in, or are there more opportunities? And the world has changed enough, and we've been flexible enough and adaptive enough over the past few years so that some of those people who questioned but didn't really move past, questioning or complaining about these things are now realizing, hey, I can actually do something about this. There are more opportunities available to me. I don't need to stay to a 9 to 5 office job because I've been home for the past couple of years and I've been able to manage these things. The world looks different. The companies are more open to different ways of working, to having different types of employees. So I think that has changed a lot. And this movement has just grown so much that companies don't have a choice. They have to respond to it, and they have to figure out new ways of working. The challenge is we don't know how to measure that yet. We don't know what that should look like. We don't know what a good model is. We don't have any data. We're experimenting constantly because it's never been done before. What good measures were before aren't good measures today, and they won't be good measures in the future. So nobody really knows how to do it in the right way, and that's very scary.
Yep.
That's very, very scary for leaders to not really know. And so I think, hopefully this will grow and develop, right? And the ideal would be to mesh what employees are looking for and the needs of the organization and figure out over the next couple of years what works and how to measure it. The problem is that it's not standardized. And when there's a lot of different options and a lot of different people, it's very, very hard to make sense of that. That data set is wow. Don't know how to put this in a box. I can't call it this because for this person it's this and this person's that. So that's where we're looking to the HR experts to kind of help and figure this out.
I think that right now everything is very uncertain. We were at a period that we say, okay, hybrid is gonna stay, or work, remote work will be dominant. And right now it looks like corporates start to having people to go back to the office to fix certain mental, certain rising risk and issue with the well-being for the staff, and going back to the office is a way to fixing it. So I'm really intrigued to see what's next for this revolution of workforce. But today I would like to play a devil advocate role. Okay, and this is the first time I ask, my speaker, is using this role. Because earlier you told me that your father was a realtor, right? And he works until he's 86 years old. And then it made me remember of my grandparents. They are 86 and 89, and then they still going out to the garden and do gardening, and raising chickens, and to give it to the to the daughters, the sons, the grandsons, and stuff like that. And to the extension that if we look at their lives, they've been through the world, a lot of wars, a lot of economic crisis, and the level of resilience that they've been built within themselves is extremely well. And then if I look at the workforce these days, that it seems to me, and then just to me, and in this conversation today, it seems that if we keep exploring options of helping people to burn out and giving them the treatment before they get to that burnout, and how can they build the muscle for resilience and so sometimes you gave medication before it's actually happening could be a very very wrong treatment, and also so I want to hear your side of the story, your thought. When you talk to leaders, you're coaching, your clients. What would be, your response to this, Michelle?
So one of the interesting things that I find is that oftentimes leaders have developed that resilience. If not, it's very hard to get a leadership position. You're in the spotlight. And not everyone is going to be happy with what you're doing and how you're doing it. And there are lots of challenges. And that's a hard place to be in. And you need to have developed along the line some resilience, right? And grit for that. One of the challenges is not all employees have that. And not all of the people that you're working with have that. And so that can oftentimes create somewhat of a conflict and a disconnect. So how can you support people in the organization, not so that they feel happy all the time, but that they're able to develop that resilience and that grit so that they can continue in the career, they can take things on, they don't get burned out. But they don't get burned out for a variety of reasons. Some of them are because of the conditions, but sometimes life is hard. Things happen, and you need to figure out a way to deal with that. And the way to deal with that is really, really important. It's really important. And if you have not been in that situation, and you're not in that situation at home, you're not in that situation at work, you don't have the opportunity to develop that muscle. You don't have the opportunity to practice. And so I think it's very, very important that leaders help their employees develop that. That there's a certain amount of pull and push, right? What is the limit? What is a challenge where you need to put people in a little bit of an uncomfortable situation, obviously with support and guidance available to them, not just when we say throw them into the swimming pool, but how can you have them help them grow and stretch their capability and stretch their tolerance for feeling uncomfortable and doing things that are difficult and being in difficult situations. And when you know that support is there, that nothing terrible is going to happen, it's a lot easier to do that than when it's coming from a place of fear or when it's coming from a place of complete uncertainty that how am I going to do this? No, it's an opportunity to learn and grow, but that you have the support there. Nothing bad is going to happen. You're not going to get fired. You're not going to get demoted. No one's going to be upset with you if it doesn't work. But you're getting the opportunity to learn to develop that resilience. And that's in a lot of different aspects. It's in the aspect of the actual work. It's in the aspect of how you relate to others, and in the aspect of exposition. So being able to present in front of people, that's also really important, right? A lot of people find that to be uncomfortable. Making hard decisions where people don't agree with you, defending your position if you need to. All of those things are really hard. Speaking up is so hard for many people. But you need to speak up. If you don't speak up, you're not heard. That is the way. That's just life, right? No one knows that you're looking for this opportunity, this promotion, if you don't express it. So I think giving people that safe space to be able to develop those things in a controlled way is really, really important. Because if not, you're going to have problems. You're going to have problems. Your employers are going to have problems. Your organization's going to have problems.
And then, Michelle, that is a very, very sensitive line between pull and push, right? And then,
Yes.
if you push too hard, you might put the people to the edge, and then but if you pull too hard, also it make them, be reliant, and so that will be a lot of things. That will be a lot of skills that leaders of the past, it's not going to work. So that there's a new skill set, there's new things the leader of the future we need to change, to unlearn and then relearn the new skills. Any significant skills that you think leaders now need to adapt and really master at that, so that they're heading on to 2023 2030, and successfully leading their organizations.
So some of the skills that I think are key is exactly what you just mentioned, adaptability. Because things are constantly changing. So being able to adapt, having that certain flexibility, innovation, creativity, doing things differently because the world is changing, those are really important skills. And I think the number one skill for any person, but particularly any leader, is communication. Because it's so important. The perception, right? Perception is so important. So you can say the same thing in many different ways, and it's received in many different ways. So oftentimes it's what you're doing and how you're communicating that has the largest impact. I think understanding how to communicate to different groups of people in different situations, and really knowing what is going to resonate, what is going to help move them forward, and what is going to be most effective in the environment in which you're working or speaking. that is the number one skill any leader needs to have.
Wow. Absolutely, absolutely. Michelle, there's one last question regarding to the professional works that you do. That also
Yep.
a lot of my audience has sent you the message we want to ask you, and because in the future there will be a lot more people want to get into the space of coaching. They want to be a professional coach. They want to be a successful coach and reliable, trustworthy coaches. Any skills, anything that they need to learn now, so that make sure their future they can be successfully being a coach.
Hmm. So again, I think listening, right?
Listening. Mm.
Understanding, listening between the lines, and I think that's a lot around understanding the context
Mm.
is so important.
Mm.
And then again, I also think that curiosity is
Mm.
so important. I know we keep saying, going back to the idea of curiosity, but
Mm.
really in all moments, questioning what could be going on,
Mm.
right? What's behind this?
Mm.
Is there anything more we need to discover? And really being able to connect the dots
Mm.
with curiosity, explore this avenue. Okay, no, and explore this avenue, right? So sometimes things are very clear and sometimes things are not clear. In a lot of sessions, we get to some point the client would have absolutely never even expected, and they say that. How did we get here from here?
Mm.
And that is the art of being a coach.
Wow. So listen
That is the art.
and give curiosity more time to learn different things behind something that we are doing. That's very beautiful. I think the curiosity is something that to me we grow up and we lost a lot of that, and not just for the old people. I also see young generations, and then specifically I want to name my daughter in here because the mentality of be there than that. I read a lot. I know a lot. So they coming in and teaching us of what they know, and then we always gave her the big question: what else can you explore? How far can you go down and research on that, and come back and share with us? So give everything that you do a little bit more curious, and more curiosity, and then learn a little bit more, so that it makes the matter a lot more fun, more joy, and make you an expert, right? So thanks for sharing those two very important skills that we need to master now if we want to become a good coach. I promised my speaking coach that I need to ask a bizarre question every speaker that I met. I got a chance to meet.
Okay,
So
okay.
I like to ask the question, and then what is the names of your two sons? One
Ah,
is two and
okay.
one
So
is six. Yeah. Yeah.
my oldest son just turned 6 last week. His name is Javier.
Javier.
Javier, yeah,
Uh,
Javier Eitan. He
uh-huh.
has two names. He has a biblical name Eitan, which we love, and then his first name is Javier. And my youngest son, he's 2, and his name is Ariel
Adien.
Benjamin.
Ah.
Ariel, which is a masculine name. It's also a biblical name. It's a masculine name, very common in Argentina. But there is the what's it called? The mermaid
Ah.
movie. I think a Disney movie called The Mermaid, and
The
the
mermaid.
protagonist was a girl, and her name was Ariel. And
Ah.
we actually didn't even think of that and didn't know it. So I always have to explain Ariel's a boy, and it actually means um, a lion of God, like God's lion.
Ah.
So it's a masculine and a feminine
So
name as well, depending on how
Adien.
you spell it.
Adien.
Ariel,
Adien.
Ariel,
Adien. Javier. Javier. Can you
and
tell them
Javier.
both that
Exactly.
that we say hello, and then tell Javier that we say happy birthday belated to him, and we wish
Thank you.
both of them all the best. And Michelle, thank you so much for spending your time with me and the audience and sharing your stories. Very fascinating to hear your stories, and we really love it. I hope one day if you come back to Vietnam for the next time, please visit our let us know, and then we will take you around town. You need to visit Ho Chi Minh City this time. You missed that the last two times, right?
Exactly, exactly. It's definitely on my list.
you
It's
know,
absolutely on my list. So I hope that I'll be able to take you up on that offer.
for
And thank you
sure.
so much
Thank
for
you
having
very
me. It
much.
was an absolute pleasure. Our conversation was wonderful. I really, really enjoyed it, and I hope your viewers do as well.
Thank you very much. Definitely. You have a beautiful day there, all right?
Thank you. You too.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.